Speaker.
Call John Hayes.
Thank you, Speaker. Well, could I say to the last speaker across the House, Sue Moroney, if it's such a sham, I am prepared to wager 12 bottles of Alana Estate Pinot Noir, Alana Estate that won first prize late last week in the Welly Awards, first prize for the whole Greater Wellington area, if we are not in surplus in 2014-2015. And if you're not prepared to take that wager on, we can see that it's you that's offering the sham.
Order.
Not this. It's the Labor Party that's offering the sham, not this side of the House, Mr. Speaker. These bills continue the government's economic and fiscal strategy to provide funding for the government to operate until the 2013 budget is passed. No sham in that. That's why we're here tonight, Ms Moroney. They're about responsible management of the government's finances. And I have to say, Ms Moroney, we are on track to return to surplus and to begin to reduce debt by 2014-15. And I am prepared to put my own money to back your lie of a sham, because that's what it is. And I would draw attention to an article in the Dominion earlier this week. In fact, I think it was either yesterday or the day before. And it's written by Lou Evans, Professor of Economics at Victoria University. You see, not only, as we discovered in the FEC committee this morning, does Mr Cunliffe and the Labor Party want to introduce a capital gains tax on every business and farm and force households to pay an extra $500 a year under an emissions trading scheme and spend and borrow more money, but in their rush to appeal to the political left and scratch every political itch, they want to ignore the economic impacts of their ideas. Their plan on electricity, outlined in this article under review, is playing politics with the value of New Zealand's economic assets, and they don't care, Ms Moroney, who it affects. Let me quote from this article. The model proposed by the Green and Labor of a single electricity buyer with price discrimination has been likened to Pharmac. The only feature the two have in common is that both face some trouble in getting supplies and investment in New Zealand. In the case of Pharmac, there are benefits to be balanced against these effects. Pharmac funds pharmacological drugs on a list it approves for New Zealand, but drugs not on the list that have health and safety approval can still be used, but they cannot be funded. What this article goes on to say, in contrast, a single buyer in electricity will be a monopoly buyer in an industry where supply is sensitive to price. He goes on, a single buyer may also have to be given regulatory powers to make operational decisions for suppliers. For example, there may be alternative uses for water that are more profitable than producing electricity at a single buyer price, meaning regulation would be needed to require generating firms to use water for power generation. Have you thought about that, Ms Moroney? No, I don't think you have thought about that. A second reason is that the wholesale market for electricity is operating relatively effectively. Yet, if it is to be restructured with no definable purpose, the proposal entails reducing the price paid for electricity from particular sources of generation and lowering the price of electricity to households. The reduced price reduces returns to private owners. The government, which owns power companies, will lose dividend revenue and receive less tax revenue from privately held electricity firms because their dividends are lower. Assuming the lost Crown revenue is to be replaced, it has to be replaced by increased taxation. That is what the Labor Party and the Green opposition in this country, this is what they're offering our community. In targeting the market, the electricity market, the proposal would produce an unstable commercial environment. An unstable commercial environment. Lewis Evans, Professor of Economics at Victoria University in this week's Dominion. He goes on to say, it is tempting to draw comparisons with health and education, where the state does buy services. However, in these, labour rather than capital determines cost. Capital and date of establishment are less of a factor in costs and profitability, so there would be an opportunity for the price manipulation of the proposal. The investment and price effects of the single buyer for electricity suggest that a better comparison would be the New Zealand Electricity Department of the 1960s and 70s. That is where the opposition wants to take us back to, the 1960s and 70s. And he goes on and he says, in that era, taxpayers paid and politicians made pricing and investment operational choices in the electricity sector. That is why David Shearer is so low in the polls, because our community knows the associated planning and control of electricity produced some poor investment decisions and meant that the price of electricity was not at its cost. So that is why it's important that we pass this legislation tonight, and it's why it is important that our country does not let us go into any form of Labor Green-run government. The option for the community is to stick with the national-led government, which is building a stronger, more stable economy that can weather global storms and deliver opportunities, higher incomes and more jobs for New Zealanders. Budget 2013 continues to do that. And I can tell you from the experience of my electorate that households in the Wairarapa and businesses there have faced some pretty challenging times in the past 5 years, including because of the global financial crisis and the Christchurch earthquakes, and with continuing global uncertainty, especially in Europe. And in some parts of the Wairarapa, especially in retailing, still businesses are facing quite difficult circumstances and difficult challenges. And while these challenges remain, the economic recovery is gaining momentum, even by low, and it's being driven in that direction by low interest rates, by investment, and by strong export prices. What I see happening right across the Wairarapa electorate is jobs being created. And I have just done some checking on my computer this evening, and I can discover that there are more than 50,000 jobs in this economy today than we had 2 years ago. The fiscal outlook has improved markedly because of the national-led government's sound management. And that is why that is why the Labor opposition is at 30% in the polls, because the community can see through things like the capital gain tax that they do not wish to have. I remember when we came into office in 2008, we inherited a set of government books that had debt running at 60% of GDP by 2020, and no prospect of a government budget surplus ever again. This government is on track to meet two key fiscal targets. First of all, to get back into surplus in 2014-2015. Ms Moroney, I'm waiting for you to pick up my wager, or are you the sham? And to bring... And is Ms Moroney the sham? Not you, Speaker. I wasn't thinking about you at all. And we will have a surplus in 2014, well, Lady Moroney, if you like, Lady Moroney. But we're going to have a surplus of 75 million 2014-2015. I'm really proud to be part of a government that is taking this country in that direction. Furthermore, Speaker, we must follow the work of the Ministerial Committee on Poverty, and Budget 2013 confirms important initiatives to support low-income families, because it is important in places like Masterton and Dannevirke that we do that. And I'm really pleased that this government is spending $100 million over the next 3 years to insulate 46,000 more homes. Very important at this time of the year. More than 21 million over the next 4 years to reduce rheumatic fever in children. an extra $1.5 million for budgeting services. Some of that will go to the budget service in Dannevirke and some will go into the budget service in Waipukurau, and I support that. Furthermore, we are supporting a whiteware program to help beneficiaries buy new appliances. Mr Speaker, this is excellent legislation which I support fully.
I call Julianne Genter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party